My name is Paul Moore. I was the writer and director of photography for Hard Turn.
Have you ever felt empty? Like the only thing you live for is no longer a part of your life? Each day gets colder and darker than the one before. Like heading down an endless tunnel.
Well, is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
Not yet.
The story kind of came to me on my way home from a 48-hour film. Like, I just went up to Cleveland to get our prop and our genre and all that. And I was trying to think of, things. And I was like, ooh, like, what if there's, this story about this guy and he's got some internal conflict, and you kind of find out, like, it's not what he thinks, it's not what the audience thinks, it's, a complete twist. It finally came to we could really do it.
Paul, the writer, me and him were at Hero Gyro one night, and he was talking about his project Torpor, which at the time that's what it was called, and he was saying, I want to get this going. I was like, well, I'm looking for a senior project, and he's like, well, I've kind of been thinking I want you to direct it, I'll DP it.
I was doing a lot of director photography work, and I was working more with lights, and I was working more with camera. I kind of thought that, maybe Jimmy would be better directing this and me shooting it.
So right there, right off the bat, I was like, yeah, since the moment I read this thing, I wanted to direct it, because I like to direct things that kind of mess with audiences' minds, kind of psychologically. So right off the bat, I was like, yeah, let's do this. And the next day, I got my producer Laura, and I'm like, yo, we're gonna start putting this thing in the ball. We're shooting this thing.
I wanted to tell a story about a person at a bar that he probably doesn't want to talk about. You probably run into these people all the time, and everybody has a story. And a lot of people have really great stories, but they necessarily don't really want to talk about them.
Casting was a fun part. Originally we had our cast, but then, things fell through, so we had to put out a casting call. And, I think it was meant to be, There's a moment I saw Skylar come into auditions, I was like, he's our guy. I don't see anyone else in this role, this is our guy.
Honestly, I've always wanted to be an actor. I just really never knew the avenue to go about to try and get into it. And, about a couple weeks ago, my buddy he forwarded me one of Jimmy's casting calls, and I read the character, sounded interesting to me. And not ever doing it, I said, what do I have to lose? So I went in, everything went pretty good. I got a call back, and was essentially chosen. So obviously that was super awesome.
When I called Skylar on that Sunday night and told him, he got the part, it's gonna be a lot of work, we still got a lot of preparation and stuff to go into it. He was all game for it, and that's what kind of made me even more happy about picking him. Someone who's willing to take time out of their lives and come and sit down with me and work out the kinks, get the character right.
Julian's he's a very dynamic character. He's got the suave and the smooth and the kind and happy side of him, and then he also has this dark and demonic side to him. So obviously that also brought about changes playing him, going from the laughing, carefree, having fun Julian to, okay, now he's in this deep, dark place.
We sent out a casting call for this role of Julian, and we knew this character had to be perfect. It needed to be what we need to see on screen, because he has voiceovers. He also has to do good on camera, look good on camera, just bring the whole character to life.
It was difficult. I mean, with this, obviously this being my first role, the dynamic of the character, it was difficult at times. The first night we were shooting, honestly, I went into, just a dark, secluded area, and I think I had a little bit of music going, and just to try and put myself in that deep, dark mental state. Then there was also, the second night, we're here, we have to, I was actually having trouble getting into that state. Just wasn't flowing for me, wasn't happening, and that's when Jimmy took me out back. We had a little chat, and he's just like, you need to get mad, eventually I was like, dude, you're really starting to piss me off. Stop, So yeah, I did have to rely on Jimmy.
The biggest thing with college is like people think you're so limited, and for me, I've been like this my whole life. It's like I go big or go home. That's just how I am. So as a senior, I wanted this to be like the absolute best I can make it be as a senior. Talking with Paul and like looking at our budget, we knew red was the choice just because you can kind of get that more grungy feel from it, and that's what we were going for.
It was a humbling experience for sure. It was the nicest camera that we've used so far, that I've used personally so far. It definitely gives you that feel that our past cameras really couldn't get us. And I don't know if I want to really blame it on the cameras or if it was just me, but this gave it more of a cinematic look, the look that we were, going for.
And then we tried to work out the car scene as much as we could. It just wasn't happening with the way the story was written. So we knew we needed a car scene, and the only way to make sure that red camera is supported is we needed to go ahead and get a hostess tray and like make sure everything's good. So we had to go ahead and put that in our budget.
Yeah, the cast and crew, everyone was great, especially for my first experience. I really didn't know what to expect, and working with Jimmy, Paul, Laura, I could go on and on. As great of talents as they all are, they're just as great of people to be around. So it just made my first experience a pleasure and truly enjoyable.
No, working with the crew was great. It's always like a toss-up of like, is the production gonna go smoothly? And it never does, but you gotta like roll with the punches, and you just gotta adjust. You gotta adapt and adjust and move on. And
when I hire a crew, I want a crew that's, they want to be there, they want to work, they want to get everything done. The crew we hired for Hard Turn was phenomenal. Everyone showed up on time. They did their job. They didn't complain. They laughed. They had a good time. If there was problems, we all solved it together. I think the crew is like kind of your like core of your production. Yeah, you see the actors on screen and all the pretty images and everything, but it's what happens behind the scene that makes all that possible.
Everybody was going at like 100, 110%, and everybody had a great attitude. The biggest thing on set, I think, is like morale. And you can get down and you can get sad and you can get worn out and tired because these are long days and harsh conditions, but you gotta look past that, and it seemed like this crew did.
Conditions really was a challenge on the third night outside. It was freezing, where I'm literally running from to set, go back to try and warm up a little bit and get ready for the next shot. We're shooting all night.
Some of the struggles with this were mostly the cold weather. Another big thing I was very concerned about was the car scene. We have like $25,000 hanging 3 feet off the side of my car. It's very nerve-wracking, and yeah, we have insurance, but still that makes, if like something happens, that's just a very nerve-wracking situation. So that whole scene for me, as much as it's supposed to be a fun scene, and we made it as enjoyable as possible, but the entire time I was like very, very scared. Once we wrapped that day, I was like, thank God, like this all looks great and like nothing's wrong, so like let's put it away and move on.
So Hard Turn in a nutshell is about a guy who has had a past with alcohol, being dependent on alcohol, and he's finding himself at a bar again like he used to.
Hard Turn, I'd say, is about an individual struggling with alcoholism, and then on top of that, going through a tragic event, and just how he reacts to it, and responds to that, and how alcoholism can truly make you two different people at times.
And you see that in Hard Turn. You see the soft, nice, sweet side of Julian, but you also see his dark devil side, and that's what alcohol does to you.
And he's having a hard time coming to terms with the recent death of his fiance, and it's flashbacks of him like reliving that night, and it's just an internal struggle that turns into an external struggle for Julian, and you see it go from mental to physical, and it's finally him coming to terms and finding out what really happened the night that his fiance died.